Hi there, this is my video assignment for assignment 2E, Old Testament literature, writings. I'm going to attempt to explain the relationship between the kings of Judah, the temple, and the use of the Psalter in Hebrew worship. There are a couple of word pictures that come to mind as I try to describe the relationship between the kings, the temple, and the Psalms themselves. The first is that of a three-legged stool. A three-legged stool in which no two legs by themselves can exist without the third. If one is pulled out, then the other two cannot support the weight of the top of the stool, which I would label as civic and religious life. You have to have the monarchs, you have to have the Psalms, and you have to have the temple to support the civic and religious life. But I want to use another analogy, one that I'll probably stick with throughout the rest of this video. It's that of a three-spoked, constantly circulating wheel of civic and religious life. It's a picture of interdependence. The king is dependent on the temple is dependent on the Psalms are dependent on the support of the monarchy and the temple using them in worship. The temple, of course, is dependent on the support of the king and the proclamation of the Psalms. Each element seems to reinforce the others. They're mutually beneficial. Let's dive into the Psalms for a minute. As kingly titles were slowly added to the Psalms throughout the centuries and the generations, the Psalms would come to draw the hearer back to the ages of the great King David, the model of leadership for all Jews everywhere. Not only that, but the hearer was reminded of God's defeat of lesser kings in the Psalms themselves, other regional powers that the God of Israel was greater than. Psalm 136, 10 through 18, for instance. Let me just read an abbreviated version of this passage as a demonstration. To him who struck down the firstborn of Egypt and brought Israel out from among them with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, to him who divided the Red Sea asunder and brought Israel through the midst of it, but swept Pharaoh and his army into the Red Sea, to him who led his people through the wilderness, to him who struck down great kings and killed mighty kings, his love endures forever. Not only is the monarchy of Judah held up in the Psalms, but the monarchies of their neighbors is torn down. The Psalms also point to the temple itself over and over again, which is good for the temple because the Psalms are likely read in the temple pretty frequently. A few examples of what I'm talking about here. Psalm 5:7, but I, by your great love, can come into your house. In reverence, I bow down toward your holy temple. A reference to the temple there in Psalm 5:7. Psalm 66, 13 through 16. I will come to your temple with burnt offerings and fulfill my vows to you. Vows my lips promised and my mouth spoke when I was in trouble. I will sacrifice fat animals to you and an offering of rams. I will offer bulls and goats. Come and hear, all you who fear God, and let me tell you what he has done for me. And finally, Psalm 68:18. Why gaze and envy, you rugged mountain, at the mountain where God chooses to reign, where the Lord himself will dwell forever? Clearly a reference to the Temple Mount. So the Psalms were very likely read in the temple as part of the liturgical cycle on a rhythm of about 1 to 3 year cycle, perhaps, as mentioned in the text for this particular assignment. There'd be no doubt in the mind of temple worshipers as they heard the Psalms read aloud in that context that the Psalms were an integral part of their faith practice. Consider also that the Psalms seem to be detached from any era. This was likely intentional, according to the text. This may have been done to allow any king and any temple establishment to use the Psalms for their own culturally specific situations, their own purposes during any era. This would also allow for the people as they worshiped, as they heard the Psalms read aloud, to hear the Psalms in light of their own lives, not just ages past. The kingly titles for many of the Psalms could be used for every era of the monarchy, The temple supported the monarchs through the reading of the Psalms and worship. The temple reminded the people that the Psalms supported the idea of the centrality of the temple. So the position of each of these three spokes on the wheel of civic and religious life, each of these spokes supported the overall structure of civic and religious life. The Psalms, to use another example, the Psalms seem to be the glue that holds together the ancient world's equivalent of the church and state, the temple and state. Thanks very much.